So now we're going to go to one of the also senior Dharma teachers in the Plum Village tradition, Richard Brady. He's a retired high school math teacher from around, I think, the Washington, D.C. area. And he's been practicing a student of Thai teacher for 29 years. He's the founder of the Mindfulness and Education Network, which was inspired largely by Thich Nhat Hanh's comments, I think in the 90s, to bring mindfulness into education. He received the transmission of the lamp to become a Dharma teacher in 2001. And lately he's been principally working with our level 1 programs, Wake Up Schools in Blue Cliff Monastery and the Avalokita Center in Italy. Level 1 in Wake Up Schools is embodying the practice. So these are retreats for teachers that happen every year. And he's also helping to coordinate the level 2 program, which is a more intensive training with a mentor over the course of a year, where we really learn how to go through the Happy Teachers book, study it, bring it into our lives as a teacher, and then share it with our students and create educator sanghas. So he's been helping to coordinate that program in North America. So I'll pass it over to Richard now.
Thank you, Ty. Thank you, Brother Papalu and Orla and all brothers and sisters who are involved in this wonderful program. In 2001, Ty came to the US to give 2 retreats, one in the East and one on the West Coast, and he put out a special call to teachers to come. And so there were a large number of teachers who came to both of these retreats. And friends and I had several special gatherings with the educators. And the one thing that came from those gatherings was a desire to stay in touch, because in 2001, there were very few people who were practicing mindfulness and trying to do something with it in their educational work. So that was the origin of the Mindfulness and Education Network. It was a listserv that began with 84 participants in 2001, almost all from the United States, many of them students of Thai. But now it has expanded to over 1,700 worldwide, and people from many different traditions, all levels of education, and all kinds of interest. Besides specifically mindfulness, many people are interested in yoga and other forms of contemplative practice. So you can find it on the internet, Mindfulness and Education Network. And in my own personal work, I started to offer mindfulness to other teachers, offering retreats in the United States, starting around 2001 with a good friend, Irene, who is from a different tradition. And Irene McHenry, in 2009, we collected stories from teachers, primarily ones who had been on our retreat, about their work with their students. And we co-edited a book called Tuning In, Mindfulness in Teaching and Learning, which was one of the very early books on mindfulness and education. It is still available from the Friends Council on Education, which is the organization that published it. In 2011, in part because of that book, when the European Institute for Applied Buddhism wanted to offer their first retreat on mindfulness for educators, Sister Annabelle got in touch with me and asked, could I send a book to her to use as a resource? And I sent it, and then I wrote back and said, how would you like to have me come too? So that was my first experience of working with Sister Annabelle and Sister Jewel, with a group of teachers, primarily from Germany, but also, I think, from Belgium and perhaps Holland, at the Institute in North Germany. And I returned in 2013 13 for another retreat there with educators, and at the same time went to Italy for the first retreat for educators, Italian educators. And that was different. It was not a monastic center. It was a center created by the lay community in the Plum Village tradition in Italy. So it's a national center. It's small in the mountains, very beautiful. And there have been 5 retreats there every summer. There have been 5 retreats in Italy of a duration of 8 days. Eventually, these retreats became part of the level 1 of Wake Up Schools as that became more formalized. And we've heard already about the fact that the focus of level 1 retreats has been on the teacher's personal practice, to deepen that practice, and particularly to share the Plum Village tradition, which is different from many other traditions of meditation practice and mindfulness practice, especially in 2 ways. The emphasis on community, on Sangha, and the strong role of happiness that is played in the Plum Village tradition. So these retreats, and then later the retreats at Blue Cliff Monastery in the Catskills in New York, that began in 2014 and have continued almost every summer, and are now drawing, most recently, 120 participants for a 5-day retreat in early August, have been very special in terms of their role of both holding suffering, learning how to be with it and transform it, and at the same time to be in touch with our own happiness, which are 2 sides of the same coin. All of these retreats are retreats in which the 5 mindfulness trainings that we've heard about from Brother Fablu have been transmitted to participants who wish to receive them. And there's always a large number of educators who wish to receive them, of those who have not already encountered them. The people who attend these retreats some are new to meditation completely. Some are new to Plum Village practice. And there are some particular practices that are important besides the sharing of happiness and learning how to work with suffering. Inclusiveness and non-discrimination are important. Beginning a practice for conflict resolution is something that comes from Plum Village and is that we share. Loving speech and deep listening. There's a lot of interaction in these retreats, formal interaction between participants as part of the program. Something that we're doing in Italy now, which for me is one of the most important things. As many of us who have meditation practices know, silence is important. And having periods of time to be with oneself and to be in a contemplative place is important. But we teachers are not very used to silence, and especially if we're new to a practice, it can actually be somewhat uncomfortable. So in Italy, when we begin our retreat now for the last 2 years, on the first afternoon, the community of teachers and staff people meet together as a community and make a decision by consensus on how much silence we will have. And for the last 2 years, the decision has been to begin noble silence at the end of the evening program and continue it through the end of lunch on each day, on the next day, every day. And so there is a great deal of silence and time to be with each other in a different way than we're used to. But we often discover that it is a much deeper way of being together in the silence. So all of this is to say that the experience of being in a level 1 retreat is a very whole experience. The practice pervades the retreat, and it emphasizes Thich Nhat Hanh's strong teaching about mindfulness, right mindfulness, as not being a tool to simply to regulate emotions, simply to improve attention, but as a way of life. And that's what we hope to communicate to the educators who come to these retreats, that this is something to incorporate in who they are, because when they go into the classroom, they are not teaching mindfulness so much as they are teaching who they are. So if they are not mindful, no matter what they teach, it's not going to make much of a difference. And if they are mindful, even if they cannot teach mindfulness, as is true in many schools in the United States so far, they are teaching something very deep to the students in their own presence. So I'd like to conclude with a brief discussion of level 2, because teachers wanted to know what comes next after we attend one of these level 1 retreats. Well, what comes next for many of them is to just continue practicing, because it's very important to have a deep practice to share as a basis for sharing with young people. But as they become involved with sanghas and the Plum Village tradition and receive the 5 mindfulness trainings, in the United States, we have begun now a second year of level 2 training, which is a 1-year program in which a relatively small number of qualified applicants have monthly telephone calls with a member of the North American Dharma Teacher Sangha. So these Dharma teachers help support the school teachers and professors in their work and in their practice so that they can be as effective as possible in their own particular setting. And of course, the first step is to make sure that they have a copy of the Happy Teacher's book that Catherine co-wrote with Ty, and that they're familiar with a variety of approaches that teachers around the world have used to teach mindfulness. And then to talk it over with their mentors in terms of what are the conditions that they face in their particular school with their particular group of students. And I think that people are doing some very interesting things. This is not a cookie cutter prescription for this is what you do in all situations, no matter who the students are, or the school, or the age of the students. Teachers need to teach something that they feel represents who they are, and that's something Pilar spoke to. And I feel that that's an important goal of this whole approach, is that teachers have to find their own voice, their own teaching, and that teaching will embody all that they have received from not only Thai and Thai's ancestors, but also many other traditions that they may be familiar with. So thank you very much for listening and being part of this conversation.
So thank you so much, Richard, for coming from the United States, I think from Vermont, right?
Yes, now Vermont.
So Richard just did a great job of summarizing the level 1 and level 2 wake-up schools. Level 1 is doing a usually 5 or 6 day retreat for teachers that goes over all the basics of the practice. and making a commitment to the 3 pillars of Wake Up Schools, which we'll hopefully have a chance to share with all the participants here. Basically embodying the practice, service, and community, building community. And then level 2, which is a year-long program of mentorship with Dharma teachers, or with Dharma teachers who are very keen to work with professional teachers in order to grow their own practice as Dharma teachers, but also to support teachers to build educator sanghas and to bring the practice into their own life and share it with students. So thank you for that summary. That's wonderful.